Florida hides more beneath its azure waters than most folks realize. Under the sun-soaked surface of the Gulf Coast and Atlantic shores, ancient secrets rest in darkness, waiting. Burial grounds older than the pyramids. Stone circles that predate Stonehenge. Human remains so perfectly preserved that brain tissue survived 8,000 years underwater. This isn't some treasure hunter's fantasy or conspiracy theory cooked up in a Clearwater beach bar. These are real archaeological sites, documented by universities, studied by scientists, and protected by the state itself. But here's what'll give you chills on your next trip to Venice Beach or Titusville. Some of these discoveries challenge everything we thought we knew about Florida's past. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll understand why certain findings have left even seasoned archaeologists scratching their heads and wondering if we've been telling Florida's story all wrong. Our journey begins in the sunken cemetery of Manasota Key. Picture this. You're diving off Venice Beach, maybe 25 feet down in the Gulf of Mexico. The water's that gorgeous emerald green that makes tourists fall in love with Florida's west coast. You're swimming along the sandy bottom when something catches your eye. Not a shell or a piece of coral, but human bones. Old ones. Really old ones. That's exactly what happened to an amateur diver back in 2016. What he stumbled across wasn't just any underwater graveyard. It was the Manasota Key offshore burial site, and it completely rewrote the history books for this part of the Sunshine State. See, most folks think of Florida as this young place, theme parks, retirement communities, and spring breakers hitting the beaches. But 25 feet under the Gulf's surface, near the quiet town of Venice, lies proof that people were calling this place home over 7,000 years ago. We're talking about the early Archaic period when most of North America was still wilderness. Here's where it gets wild. These aren't just scattered bones lying on the seafloor. The bodies were carefully buried in what used to be a freshwater pond, surrounded by wooden stakes driven deep into the peat. The preservation is so incredible that archaeologists found textiles, actual fabric, still wrapped around some of the remains. Fabric that's older than the Great Wall of China, sitting pretty in Florida's coastal waters. But wait, it gets stranger. When this burial site was active, 7,000 years ago, the Gulf of Mexico was nowhere near this spot. Sea levels were so much lower that what's now underwater was dry land, dotted with cypress swamps and freshwater ponds. The people who lived here, ancestors of Florida's native tribes, chose this exact location for their sacred burial ground. They drove those wooden stakes into the pond bottom with purpose, arranging their dead with reverence that still echoes through the centuries. Then the ice caps melted, the seas rose, and this ancient cemetery was swallowed by salt water, preserved in a time capsule that wouldn't be discovered for 70 centuries. What keeps archaeologists up at night is the sophistication of it all. These weren't primitive people just tossing bodies in the water. The burial practices show complex spiritual beliefs, advanced woodworking skills, and a deep understanding of their environment. They knew that peat would preserve their loved ones. They understood the chemistry of their swampland better than most modern folks understand their own backyards. And here's the kicker. This site represents the first example in all of the Americas where offshore preservation kept an entire Archaic period environment intact. Not just the bones, but the whole ecosystem. Pollen samples, plant materials, and even the wooden stakes tell the story of what Florida looked like when mammoths still roamed Georgia. Now, if you think the Manasota Key site is mind-bending, wait till you hear about what they found near Titusville, just a stone's throw from Kennedy Space Center. The Windover Pond discovery makes every other archaeological find in Florida look like amateur hour. Back in the 1980s, developers were clearing land for a subdivision when they hit something unexpected. Not the usual shell middens or pottery shards you might find around Central Florida. They found human skulls. Lots of them. But these weren't recent burials or even colonial-era graves. These remains were 8,000 years ancient. What started as a routine construction project turned into one of the most important archaeological discoveries in North American history. The Windover archaeological site revealed something that shouldn't exist. Human remains were so perfectly preserved by the acidic, oxygen-free environment of the pond that scientists could still examine brain tissue. 8,000-year-old brain tissue, floating in Florida pond water, looks like it died yesterday. Think about that for a second. When these people were alive, the Sahara Desert was still a green grassland. The wheel hadn't been invented yet, and somehow, their burial site in a central Florida pond preserved them better than modern funeral homes preserve bodies today. 168 individuals were found buried in that muck, their bodies deliberately staked underwater at the edge of the ancient pond. Just like at Manasota Key, wooden stakes held the bodies in place. But at Windover, the preservation was so extraordinary that archaeologists found textiles woven from plant fibers, the oldest known fabric in North America. Some bodies were wrapped in these ancient textiles like burial shrouds, suggesting spiritual beliefs and cultural practices that were far more complex than anyone expected from Florida's earliest inhabitants. Here's what'll blow your mind. The pond wasn't just a cemetery. It was chosen specifically because the people understood how water chemistry worked. They knew that the acidic, low-oxygen environment would preserve their dead. These weren't ignorant savages stumbling around the wilderness. They were sophisticated people with advanced knowledge of their environment, carefully selecting burial sites that would honor their ancestors for millennia. But the real mystery is what this tells us about Florida's forgotten past. For 8,000 years, families would return to this same pond to bury their dead. Generation after generation, century after century, they maintained this sacred tradition. The site became a focal point for their entire culture, suggesting that Central Florida had stable, organized communities long before anyone imagined. And then, just like at Manasota Key, time swallowed it up. The pond became a marsh, the marsh became a field, and the field became a development site. If those bulldozers hadn't broken ground in exactly the right spot, Windover would still be sleeping under a Florida subdivision, its secrets buried forever. Think about this. If construction workers hadn't broken ground in that exact spot near Titusville, 168 perfectly preserved ancient Floridians would still be rotting under a subdivision parking lot. Right now, bulldozers are probably destroying sites just like Windover across Central Florida. If you won't subscribe to help us document these discoveries before they're paved over forever, at least explain in the comments why 8,000-year-old human brain tissue isn't remarkable enough to earn a free subscription. Head down to Charlotte County, near Northport, and you'll find something that looks like a postcard from prehistoric Florida. Little Salt Spring is one of those deep, dark sinkholes that dot the landscape throughout the central part of the state. Most folks drive past it without a second thought. Just another pretty sinkhole in a state full of them. But Little Salt Spring isn't your average swimming hole. This place is a time machine, reaching back 12,000 years into Florida's past. And what scientists have pulled out of its depths challenges everything we thought we knew about the first people to call this peninsula home. The spring plunges down 245 feet into the earth, creating a perfect preservation chamber. The water stays a constant 72 degrees year-round, and the lack of oxygen at the bottom keeps organic materials from decaying. It's like nature's own deep freeze, holding on to secrets for thousands of years. When divers first explored the deeper parts of Little Salt Spring in the 1970s, they found something incredible. Not just the usual Native American artifacts you might expect, but evidence of Paleo-Indian hunters from the very end of the Ice Age. Stone tools, wooden spears, and the bones of animals that haven't walked Florida soil for 10,000 years. Here's where it gets crazy. They found the overturned shell of an extinct giant land tortoise sitting on a ledge 90 feet down. But this wasn't just any old fossil. Someone had flipped that tortoise shell over and was using it as a tool. 12,000 years ago, when Florida was a much drier, cooler place, Paleo-Indian hunters were using tortoise shells as, well, nobody's quite sure what. Maybe water containers. Maybe ceremonial bowls. Maybe something we can't even imagine today. But the real treasure trove starts around 8,000 years ago, when Little Salt Spring became a sacred burial site. Just like Windover and Manasota Key, ancient Floridians chose this water source for their most important ceremonies. Hundreds of burials have been found in the spring, many with brain tissues still intact after thousands of years underwater. The preservation is so incredible that archaeologists can tell what these people ate for their last meals. They can see evidence of diseases, injuries, and even the wear patterns on their teeth that reveal how they used tools. It's like having a medical examiner's report on people who died before the invention of agriculture. What keeps researchers fascinated is the continuity. For thousands of years, different cultures used Little Salt Spring for burial ceremonies. The Paleo-Indians gave way to archaic peoples, who gave way to later woodland cultures, and each group recognized this place as sacred. Something about this particular sinkhole drew people back, generation after generation, century after century. Maybe it was the constant temperature. Maybe it was the spiritual significance of deep, dark water in the middle of dry land. Or maybe they understood something about this place that we're still trying to figure out. Now, not every underwater mystery in Florida dates back thousands of years. Off Mexico Beach in the Panhandle sits the Vamar, a World War II-era ship that sank in 1942. While it's not ancient like the other sites we've explored, the Vamar teaches us something crucial about how Florida's waters preserve the past, and its own story is stranger than most people realize. Originally built in 1919 as HMS Kilmarnock, an Admiralty trawler, armed for anti-submarine warfare, for the Royal Navy, this ship lived 3 completely different lives before ending up on Florida's seafloor. In 1928, Admiral Richard Byrd purchased the vessel, which had previously been involved in liquor smuggling, renaming it the Eleanor Bolling in honor of his wife. But here's where the story gets incredible. Byrd spent $76,000 in repairs and upgrades at the Todd shipyard in England, with the most important upgrade being reinforcement of the bow area to withstand Antarctic ice. The Eleanor Bolling subsequently became the first metal-hulled vessel to be used in Antarctic waters. This ship didn't just transport supplies to Antarctica, it made history there. The vessel proved sturdy but not especially stable. Her crew, after encountering rough waves in the Southern Ocean, nicknamed her Evermore Rolling. For 2 years, from 1928 to 1930, the Eleanor Bolling carried Byrd's expedition supplies between Antarctica and New Zealand, playing a crucial role in one of the most famous polar expeditions in history. After the Antarctic adventure, the ship was sold and renamed Vamar, becoming a tramp freighter hauling lumber between Florida ports and Cuba. On March 21, 1942, while carrying lumber to Cuba, she sank under mysterious circumstances while leaving Port St. Joe. The exact cause has never been determined, adding another layer of mystery to this already remarkable vessel. Today, the Vamar rests in approximately 25 feet of water and is visible from the surface when the water is clear. But what makes this wreck archaeologically significant isn't just its history. It's what divers can still see after over 80 years underwater. Divers exploring the site will find hull plates, deck beams, chain, and a capstan. The massive steam engine and generator that once powered the freighter are clearly visible, along with the rudder and rudder shaft at the stern. The huge steam engine and connecting plates are exposed, as well as the bilge keel, mast supports, and davits. The preservation is remarkable, but it's also telling us something important about how Florida's marine environment works. The Gulf of Mexico's warm, salty water creates predictable preservation patterns. Metal corrodes in specific ways. Organic materials decay at measurable rates. The same processes that slowly claim the Vamar have been protecting Florida's prehistoric sites for thousands of years. The Vamar became the 9th Florida underwater archaeological preserve when it was dedicated in 2004 and was added to the U.S. National Register of Historic Places in 2006. It serves as a perfect laboratory for understanding how Florida's waters preserve the past, and why discoveries like Windover and Manasota Key have survived in such incredible condition. But the Vamar also serves as a warning. Even in the best preservation conditions, time takes its toll. Each storm that churns the Gulf bottom, each change in water chemistry, each year that passes damages these irreplaceable windows into history. The race is on to document and study all of Florida's underwater sites before they're lost forever. Now here's where things get uncomfortable for mainstream archaeology. When you step back and look at all these Florida sites together, Windover, Manasota Key, Little Salt Spring, a pattern emerges that challenges some fundamental assumptions about prehistoric America. First, there's the sophistication. These weren't primitive hunter-gatherers stumbling around the wilderness. The people who created these sites had advanced knowledge of hydrology, chemistry, astronomy, and engineering. They could predict which environments would preserve their dead for millennia. They could carve perfect circles into bedrock. They could establish trade networks that stretched across the continent. Second, there's the timeline. Every new discovery pushes human habitation in Florida back further. Sites that were supposed to be 8,000 years old turn out to be 10,000. Sites that were 10,000 turn out to be 12,000. But here's the part that makes some archaeologists nervous. The burial practices, the spiritual sophistication, the understanding of natural preservation, it all suggests that Florida's prehistoric inhabitants had knowledge that we're only now beginning to understand. They knew things about their environment that took modern science centuries to figure out. Take the pond burials. For decades, scientists couldn't understand why bodies buried in Florida's acidic waters were so well preserved. It took sophisticated chemical analysis to figure out that the combination of pH levels, oxygen depletion, and organic acids creates perfect preservation conditions. But somehow, 8,000 years ago, people without chemistry textbooks or pH meters knew exactly which ponds would preserve their ancestors. Here's the cover-up that isn't. Now, before you start thinking there's some grand conspiracy to hide Florida's ancient past, let's get one thing straight. There's no cover-up. The problem is much simpler and much more heartbreaking. Most of these sites are being destroyed faster than they can be studied. Every hurricane that slams into Florida's coast scatters artifacts and disturbs burial sites. Every new condo development bulldozes through potential archaeological sites. Every boat that drags an anchor across the continental shelf damages irreplaceable prehistoric camps. The Windover site was almost lost to suburban sprawl. Dozens of other sites haven't been so lucky. They've been paved over, dredged up, or simply forgotten as Florida's population exploded from 4 million to over 22 million in just 60 years. Most of these incredible sites will be completely destroyed within our lifetime. Every day you delay hitting that subscribe button is another day these stories might disappear forever before we can share them with you. If you can't even click subscribe to help preserve Florida's ancient mysteries, at least tell us in the comments why these 8,000-year-old burial sites aren't worth 30 seconds of your time. Here's something that often gets overlooked in all the excitement about ancient artifacts and mysterious burial practices. These aren't just archaeological curiosities. They're the ancestors of Florida's Native American communities, and those communities have something to say about how their heritage is being studied and preserved. Whether you're a lifelong Floridian or someone who just moved here for the beaches and the weather, you're living on top of one of the most archaeologically rich landscapes in North America. Beneath your feet, beneath the waters you swim in, and beneath the developments, highways, and theme parks lies evidence of sophisticated cultures that called this place home for over 10,000 years. These weren't primitive people struggling to survive in a hostile wilderness. They were skilled engineers who understood their environment better than most modern humans understand theirs. They created art that still moves us, spiritual traditions that echo through the centuries, and technological innovations that we're only now beginning to appreciate. Their story is Florida's story, and it's a story that's still being written, one underwater discovery at a time. Every time you drive over the Skyway Bridge, you're crossing water that once was dry land, dotted with villages and camps and ceremonial sites. Every time you swim in the Gulf or the Atlantic, you're floating over the remains of an entire civilization that thrived when the world was completely different. That's the real treasure of Florida's underwater archaeology. Not gold or silver or jewels, but knowledge, understanding, a connection to the deep past that puts our modern lives in perspective and reminds us that this land has always been special, always been home to people who recognized its magic. So the next time you're standing on a Florida beach, watching the sun set over water that stretches to the horizon, remember this. Somewhere out there, beneath the waves, in the darkness and silence of the deep, ancient Floridians rest in their underwater graves. Their wooden stakes still mark sacred ground. Their artifacts still tell stories of life and death and spiritual beliefs that shaped this peninsula for thousands of years. They're still here in a way, still part of Florida's story, still waiting to teach us about who we are and where we came from. And maybe, just maybe, if we listen carefully to what the water tells us, we can learn something from its wisdom. Something about living in harmony with this strange and beautiful place we call home. Something about respect for the past and responsibility for the future. Because Florida's underwater mysteries aren't just about the past. They're about understanding who we are today and who we might become tomorrow. The deep keeps its secrets well. But sometimes, if you know how to look, it shares them with those who are ready to listen. And that's just the beginning of what lies beneath Florida's waters. If this journey into Florida's underwater past has captured your imagination, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more mysteries from the Sunshine State coming your way, including the strange lights over the Everglades and the unexplained sounds echoing through Florida's underwater caves. Drop a comment below and let us know. Have you ever found anything unusual while diving or swimming in Florida waters? Your discovery could be the next piece of the puzzle in understanding our state's incredible ancient past. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, in Florida, the most incredible stories are often the ones hiding just beneath the surface.